Hello Dragon Ball Super players, I'm Legends of Team Foe x PPG, and I'm here to bring you my top 8 Invoker deck profile from this past weekend's PPG live event, which will mark the first event to start off the Pro Play Tour season. Let's jump right in. This time I'm going to try to do the deck profiles a little differently from my past Invoker deck profiles, just to change it up a little bit since they do start to blend together after a while. So this time I'm going to try to do the deck profile in kind of like my turn order, my starters, what you're trying to find and what you're trying to mulligan, etc. So to start off with, we're playing the Sun Goku Set 9 Surge Leader. He has this nifty activate battle. When this card is in battle, choose one extra card in your hand and place it in your drop area. Then choose up to one card in your life and add it to your hand, and then draw one card. Then this card gains 5k power for this battle and negate the skill for the duration of the battle. So essentially you can combo once per battle with this while this leader is in battle with an extra card in your hand and then draw a card and cycle with it, effectively making the front side of this leader a 15k base. As long as you always have extra cards in your deck, and you'll see we play about 28 extra cards, maybe more than that. But the deck is an extra card focused deck, and for our awakening requirements we have Awaken Surge. And for those new to the game, Awaken Surge is not the same as Awakening. You can choose one card from your hand, or choose one red card and one blue card in your hand and place them underneath this card. Then you may draw 3 cards, untap up to 1 of your energy, and switch this card or flip this card over. On the backside, if you have 5 or less life, you may activate main or battle this following effect once per turn. You can choose one of the following. If you have a Universe 7 card in play, draw 1 card. Then your opponent reveals their hand. You choose up to 1 extra card or battle card with 35k power or less in their hand and put it in the drop area. This is an incredible card when you're trying to prevent them from answering your plays or to make sure you can get through for game. And then the second effect does not require a Universe 7 card in the field. You can choose up to 3 multicolor extra cards with different names in your drop area and or warp and add them to your hand. This allows you to grab the perfect extra cards to prevent your opponent from winning the game on their following turn. Oftentimes you'll use this effect as an activate battle, and you use the previous effect as an activate main. Of course, situations do come up. So like I said, we're going to try to do this deck profile in a different order this time. Starting with our main deck, and definitely the first card you want to find is your Mulligan. If you are playing a 50 card deck like I do, and you play 4 copies of this Tournament Power Arena, you have approximately a 41% chance to find this card in your first 6 cards that you draw for pre-Mulligan. And then if you don't have this card in your hand, and you Mulligan all 6, of course you have a 41% chance to find it again. If you're good at probability math, when you send it back for a 6th time, it technically equals out to a total of 60% and change to find this card in your first 12 cards, counting a full 6 mulligan. So 2 out of 3 games, approximately, you're going to see this card in your opening hand, as long as you mull all 12 cards for it, or all 6 cards for it. This card becomes a field card for 1 blue energy. Comes on the field as long as your leader is a Universe 7 card. Then it negates the energy exhaust of all blue-red multicolor cards that in all areas, meaning no matter how you charge the card, whether it's through your 6-drop later in the game or it's just through your hand, all of your multicolor red-blue cards are dual lands or check lands, which is awesome. And then it has this really nifty main, which was the most broken effect I've found in Dragon Ball so far. If your leader card is Universe 7 card and you switch this card to rest mode, so you tap it to use it, you look at up to the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you can place them back on top or at the bottom of your deck in any order. This provides us many things that we can do. Of course, just at the start, the fact that you can reorder the top 3 cards of your deck means that you can set up your fetch spells, which we'll go into later. But even more powerful about this card is you can send those 3 cards to the bottom of your deck, essentially pushing your deck forward by 3 turns because you don't have to hard draw those cards anymore. The difference between a lot of newer players and more seasoned players with this deck is that ability to be able to send those 3 to the bottom of the deck and foresee your future turns or not needing those cards. Another little nifty thing that, embarrassingly, I just learned at this event is when you're using Top's effect to look at the top 3 cards, it does say look at up to the top 3 cards. So if you're already deep in your deck and or just as a habit, you can look at each card one at a time, and if you see 2 terrible cards off to the top of the deck, then you can just go ahead, like say you already have one of these on the field and you see 2 more off the top of your deck as you're going to search the top 3. You can just stop at the 2 and then send to the bottom of the deck, and now you don't have to worry about drawing this, knowing that the chances of the 3rd card being useful are very high. That's adds another layer of decision to the deck when you're using top. So of course, you definitely want to find top in your hand and a mono blue energy to be able to play top on one. After you have your top and a mono blue energy on one, you're looking for any of the following 12 cards. We call them our fetch spells. We play 4 Royal Condemnation, 4 Catastrophic Blow, and 4 Emperor's Death Beam. Now, all of these have the same activate main, where if they're in your drop area, you can warp them from your drop area or send them from your drop area to your warp. Then look at the top card of your deck. If that card is a multicolor extra card, you may reveal it to your opponent and add that card to your hand. This is the core of how this deck draws, so this deck effectively gets an extra 12 draws out of itself, in addition to sending cards to the bottom and the leader cycling a card, and oftentimes this is how the deck sees through the whole deck very quickly. Um, of course, depending on what matchup uh, you're playing against, depends on what cards you're willing to throw in the beginning. 99% of the matchups, you're going to be able to throw away at least 2 catastrophic blows in the beginning of the game. So if you already have your top and a blue card, you definitely want to keep catastrophic blows. In about 50% of the games, you might have to keep an Emperor's Death Beam, so you don't want to see this early. So I got to say that again. If you think you're going to need the Emperor's Death Beam in that matchup, such as let's say like the mirror match or like a Slug versus Mecha Frieza, or that like Goku that Mecha Frieza plays, then you cannot afford to throw this card away early. Therefore, you do not want to keep it in your opening hand, and you'd rather draw into it organically between your leader and these fetch effects. You want to keep cards in your hand, your opening hand, that you can toss away to start your cycle effect. And of course, after the catastrophic blow comes this Royal Condemnation, which also can often be thrown away. The only matchup where you really need to keep at least one in your hand is versus green decks, because then you can use this to stop their charismatic villain Frieza. And of course, second best to all the fetch cards, we have this We're in This Together card. We're in This Together has this activate main. If your leader card is Universe 7, you can choose all of your opponent's battle cards with 25k power or less and KO them. That effect is not used that often anymore in this game. However, it also has this really cool activate main, which is what we care about, where you can pay 1 red, and if your leader card is Universe 7, of course it is, you can add this card from your drop area to your hand. So that's really cool, because you can discard it with your leader to draw a card, right? And then later on your next turn, you can pay 1 red, put it back in your hand, and now you've effectively drawn a free card for this card, and now you can discard it again for your leader to draw another card, and then pay another red to pick it back up, going to your opponent's turn with only 1 energy up, which allows you to play around stuff like Broly, Crown of Retribution. But more importantly, it gives you like a way of turning this card into like a draw 1, right? As long as you're willing to spend red energy. Additionally, it also gives you some really cool plays where you can pay a red, pick it up, and then use it to awaken your leader. That way you can make use of that energy before you have to untap and draw the 3, and this doesn't spend a card out of your hand. So early game, especially on turn 2, this is definitely one of the better cards you want to see. In a perfect world, you can go turn 1 into top. On your opponent gets 2 attacks. For the first attack, you'll always discard some kind of fetch spell. The second attack, you'll discard a We're in This Together. You go into your turn. You'll likely reorder with the top, fetch some spell with Catastrophic Blow. Then you'll pay 1 red that you charged on turn 2 to pick this back up. And then now you're able to discard this as well with your leader and draw exactly what you need off top. So that would be an ideal start with this deck. Definitely these are your openers for this deck if it had any. And then we'll move into like our techie, like red-blue multicolor spells, I like to call them. So in no particular order, we have 2 copies of Instinctive Reprisal. Instinctive Reprisal is a red-blue multicolor extra card, which means you can fetch him off of your active mains of your 12 fetch spells. And it's a counter attack that says negate this attack, choose up to 2 of your opponent's leader cards and or battle cards, and they get minus 10k power for the turn. This is really cool because it kills those like pesky 1-drops a lot of players or decks like to play. Like King Cole likes to play those like Berry Blue 1-drops or the Paragus Sacrifice 1-drops, or even like Vegeta wants to play those Son Goku or Vegeta True Fighting Spirits. This is a great way to get rid of those cards for very low energy commitment. Plus, the fact that you can fetch it off of these fetch spells means it just makes your deck that much more consistent. And of course, the backside of your leader can also pick this card up. One of the hardest things to get used to when you're just getting into this deck is being willing to throw away your multicolor extra cards to the front side leader of effect to cycle cards and take some damage early game, so that later when you pick them up, later when you need to pick them up with your backside leader effect, you're gonna have them in your drop to use. So definitely, even though like you might need this card, even though you think you might need this card as an extra negate early game, it's definitely better just to cycle it and have access to it in the drop area. And that goes for every single spell in this deck, and definitely more so when it comes to spells like Sleepy Boy and like combination attack, right? So speaking of Sleepy Boy and combination attack, second in the list of like techie spell cards we got, and I say spell cards because of my Yu-Gi-Oh background, but we have combination attack, which is a 2 mana activate battle, which allows you to choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 5 or less, return it to its owner's hand, and then choose up to one of your red or blue energy and switch it to active mode. This card is just actually insane, right? It's the second reason why like no battle card decks can really kill us, and it lets us get out of like really early game pressure cards like that Demigra 5-drop from the draft box. Um, you can like on 2 mana, they usually play it on their 2 mana, so you can respond on your 2 mana to just bounce it back to the hand. And you're like, that kind of sucks. Why would I want to put it back in the hand? Well, that's a lot of tempo loss, right? Like if they have to tap another 2 mana the next turn to play this big dude that only hits you for 1 damage, or and then like warp their entire drop to do it again, like that's amazing. That's a win in my book. This also like prevents like early all-ins in case like somebody sees you at 2 life in this deck and then they decide to go all in with a 5-drop or less. Now you have access to this combination attack. You can awaken your leader and pick it back up and then fling that card back in their hand. And this card is another card once again that has a lot of strength just being in your drop early. Like yeah, you can hold on to it as like a surprise, you couldn't kill me, but like that's gonna lose you a lot more games over the your career as an Invoker player rather than it will win you games. Just holding cards means you're not drawing cards or you're not cycling, unless of course you have something better to cycle with. But oftentimes like your deck's going to be limited to like 7 or 8 cards in the early game. And of course our last tech spell, Sleepy Boy Technique. A lot of newer Invoker players read this card and they realize how broken it is and they want to play this card in like many copies. But Sleepy Boy, one of the biggest limitations of this card is it's a 3-drop spell, right? It's a 3-drop counter attack, negate the attack, draw 2 cards, then choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and return it to its owner's hand. I mean, this card is insane. You're getting all these effects for 1 mana each. For 1 mana, you can negate the attack. Your second mana, you can draw 2 cards, which is already a discern. And then for the third mana, you like bounce one of your opponent's battle cards, so you remove another threat. This is especially effective versus that Supreme Kai of Time SCR. If you return that Supreme Kai of Time SCR to their hand, instead it actually leaves the field. Same with the VJX Vegeta Time Agent, whatever it is called. It also removes that card from the field. Actually, it gets warped instead of being removed. So in that sense, Sleepy Boy is really good. However, the fact that it's a 3-drop means it doesn't actually become live until turn 3 or 4, and sure, maybe turn 5, but hopefully your opponent's dead by turn 5 if you're playing the deck correctly. So oftentimes you won't get to resolve more than 1 or 2 copies of this card. Very rare instances do you ever get to resolve a third copy of this card through your leader effect. And for that logic in itself, there's no value in playing a third copy of this card. The first copy you see in a game, you always just chuck it to the grave immediately with your leader, send it down, because it really is not going to turn on that fast anyway, and then you can always pick it up when you pick up the 3 cards from your leader. It's definitely one of the best cards to pick up with your leader when you're picking up 3 spell cards. Moving away from our spell card package and what makes this deck such a control deck, we're going to go into our mid game, what I like to call Invoker decks like mid game. For our mid game, we play just the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta inspired technique, and it's probably the only battle card we play, or our opponent gets to see before the game ends for them on turn 5. Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta inspired technique simply just has 4 keyword skills, right? It has barrier and deflect, which effectively means your opponent's not interacting with it the turn it comes down, and it's difficult for them to interact with it even afterwards. And then it has energy exhaust, which is irrelevant in this deck. Actually, most of the time you end up charging extra copies of this card because he's so dead in hand. He's actually kind of like the perfect card to charge. And sometimes a decent card to awaken with. On that note, like if you're awakening in this deck, when you finally do have to awaken, you want to typically try to awaken with spell cards if you can, or just dead Vegetas in your hand. The reason why you prefer to awaken with spell cards, especially with like some of these fetch cards, is you can use your backside leader effect to put the fetch card in the drop and then fetch with it instantly to try to find another plus. Plus, having extra fetch cards or spell cards under your leader means you can set up for your Apex of Power a lot easier. But back to this Vegeta, because I kind of went off the rails there. This Vegeta's final keyword skill is Invoker. Invoker is a permanent/replacement effect, which allows you to cast all of your red-blue extra cards for 1 red-blue energy, which is by far the most broken card effect in this game. Or keyword skill in this game, in my opinion. it completely shatters the boundaries of like what makes a card game balance. Card game balance comes in the form of like the vanilla test and how cards equate out to how much they cost. So Invoker as a skill completely just shatters that, right? And it's why this deck is so good once Invoker comes down. Once Invoker comes down, you're allowed to resolve all of these cards, such as like this Sleepy Boy card that should cost 4, costs 1 instead. When I say should cost 4, I mean like the vanilla test of this card would be a 4. This combination attack costs 1, but then untaps the 1 under Invoker, so it's free, which is insane. This Instinctive Reprisal is probably the most balanced red-blue spell under Invoker. For 1 energy, you do exactly what 1 energy should give you. You negate the attack, and then you like reduce 2 cards by 10k, which is most of the time irrelevant. It lets you play this ridiculously broken card, Emperor's Death Beam, which should be a 3 energy card, but it costs 1 now. It lets you choose any battle card, ignoring Bear, reduce their power by 30k, activate main or battle, which essentially allows you to remove any battle card from the face of this game whenever you need to with this card. It lets you use the arguably one of the best counterplays in the game for a card that should absolutely cost 4 mana or more. It lets you, for 1 mana, bottom deck any battle card that's an 8 drop or less coming into play. That hits most SCRs in this game. Most boss monsters that, almost every boss monster that's not an SCR and does not have deflect, this hits. It maybe misses out on like 2 or 3 SCRs in this game, so it's ridiculous. And then of course, oh yeah, let's not walk over the Raigeki effect of we're in this together. Remember how I talked to you about that that activate main ability that was like kind of mediocre? Where you can like wipe everything for 25k. For 4 energy, that's a really bad effect. But for 1 energy, being able to wipe a board of 25k or less is actually just absurd. And then of course we have our final burn damage. It allows us also to play Catastrophic Blow for 1 damage each. Catastrophic Blow should very well be like a 20 mana effect to deal one damage. I mean that's an exaggeration, but the ability to pay 1 to deal 1 is not balanced. So the Invoker keyword skill definitely is what breaks this deck and pushes it over the edge. But yeah, so our mid game, generally turn 3 or 4, is when you want to slam Vegeta. If the deck you're playing against is not very fast, then you can afford to play it on turn 3 and hold the Beer Super combo. If the deck you're playing against is super fast, most of the time you have to wait till turn 4, that way you can play it and just leave an energy up. But a lot of people, so I just went over about how broken the keyword skill for Invoker is. Why do we not play 4? Well, this card, like I said, you really only get to play it on turn 3 or 4, and you really only get to play 1 per game, right? Every other extra copy you see is super dead. Definitely as a novice Invoker player, I would urge you to get used to charging this card on turn 1 or 2. That way you have more live cards in your hand to play with. This deck inherently is a deck full of dead cards, right? And it's up to you to be able to navigate the waters of these dead cards and find a way to maximize or optimize what live cards you have access to. Right? And your opponent, for your opponent, it doesn't look the same way, right? Your opponent just thinks every single card in your hand's a negate, and you can do everything with it. But the truth really is, it's up to you to make it seem that way, to create this illusion of protection or security. And a lot of that requires some difficult choices, like charging this Vegeta early. And even though that might seem even scarier with only 3 left in the deck, I assure you, by the time you absolutely need to play this Vegeta, you will have it in your hand, as long as you are cycling through your deck and using top effectively, right? So we're moving past our mid-game Vegeta, and we'll go into what I consider like the floodgates for the deck. It's kind of troll of me to say Senzu Bean is a floodgate, but because the leader is a 15k on the front side, Senzu Bean puts the leader to a 20k effectively as long as you have other extra cards to throw away or to cycle away. Then Senzu Bean becomes a 20k, and for all the decks that only hit at like 15k, no combo, like try to get cards out of your hand or free pressure, like Senzu Bean just gets rid of that, right? And like in addition to the fact that it untaps mana for you, allowing to use the rest of these extra cards like free willy-nilly sometimes makes it so you can use some of these really expensive extra cards at their cost without Invoker because you have multiple ways to untap with the Senzu Bean. So in many ways this becomes an extra floodgate for the deck, for low to the ground decks. And of course we still play our 4 copies of Violent Rays. Now that Dark Broly is kind of like hit or miss at whatever event you go to, Violent Rays becomes less like applicable, but it still has applications against some of our worst matchups, right? Like versus Dark Broly, that matchup is nigh impossible without seeing multiple copies of Violent Rays, or like unless you're on the play and you slam Vegeta on 3, right? And then versus Sin Shenron, of course, Violent Rays is really good. Almost in every matchup, you can find a way to make Violent Rays really worth it. And if you don't, at worst, it's a 1 energy negate attack, and then at the very, very, very worst, it's still an extra card that your leader can discard to gain 5k combo power and just draw a card. And in many ways, that is enough for me to want to play this card over Topo. Although going forward into the format, as decks go wider, wider, and wider, and lower to the ground, I might cut one or two copies of Violent Rays to move into Topo or other tech cards I'd love to try in the future. And of course, since we are playing two colors, one of which is a good color, the other one is red, we do play Dimension Magic as our negate. Dimension Magic, for those who don't know yet, it's a 1 energy negate that you pay 1 and then you untap 2 energy, right? That already seems really ridiculous in a deck that lives and dies off his energy. But even more importantly, you can tap your blue energy should you be left up with a blue energy, and then untap 2 of your red-blue energy, leaving up extra energy for your Invoker ability, which pushes this deck even further over the edge if it wasn't already. And that's something I definitely want you to experiment with. Sometimes people side in silver bullets to kill this deck. If you've noticed throughout this entire deck profile, the silver bullets from the draft box only hit this Dimension Magic. And if they play that card, do not fear. You can just cycle them with your leader effect and then untap through Beans and Beeruses. And of course, as we just talked about this card, we have our super combo Beerus Divine Obliterator. There are many reasons why we choose to play this over the Zeno super combo. If you'd like to have that discussion, I would definitely help you out seeing why I chose to go with Beerus Divine Obliterator over the other choices. But most importantly, it is a super combo you can use 0 for 10, which will allow you to untap 1 blue-red energy, specifically in your energy. This can trip up Novice Invoker players a lot. They'll be using Beans or D-Magics to untap the red-blue energies, and then when they go to Beerus, they can't untap fully on their energy because they only have a blue energy tapped down. Something to look out for when you're playing this deck. And then we move into our end game. Bandai printed this Son Goku Rival Seeker, which gave us the ability to kill on turn 5, and gave this deck 4 more super combos effectively. Well, really 3 more, because you're going to save 1 for your kill turn. But this is a 1 for 10k super combo that becomes a 0 for 10k as long as you have a red-blue multicolor card in the drop area. Already insane. It has this activate main ability once per turn if you have 5 or more energy, so that's why we have to wait to turn 5. And you have to charge every turn. And you add 2 multicolor extra cards, 2 red-blue multicolor extra cards from your warp to your drop. Note that you have to add 2, cannot be up to 2. That is the cost of that effect. So you activate that, that's the cost. And then you may choose up to 1 red-blue multicolor Son Goku card with an energy cost of 6 in your hand and play it on top of this card. Currently, to my knowledge, there are only 2 cards that fit that description. There's the next card we're going to talk about, and then there's this like triple attacker or triple strike infinite attacker card that we don't play until they ban Catastrophic Blow. But until then, this card allows us to set up our burn combo with our energy explosion. Depending on how many copies of this combo you have in your hand, you can go anywhere from 3 to 15 burn damage in a game. It definitely is one of the best ways to win a game since it's uninteractable damage once this card comes down, right? Your opponent has an opportunity to interact with this card or this card, most of the time Rival Seeker, and if they miss on any of those interactions or you rip those choices out of your opponent's hand, then you can definitely close out the game as long as you've done the math beforehand. If you are new to the deck, I encourage you to just sit there and figure out the different burn combos you can do with XYZ amount of cards, these cards in your hand. Just go to 5 energy, set yourself to 5 energy, and start adding different counts of like Rival Seekers, Energy Explosions, and Catastrophic Blows to your hand. And then you can start experimenting and see what you can do. Then you can throw in Beans or your Awakening on your leader to see how much extra energy you need to do XYZ amounts of damage. And it's definitely a fun way to like goldfish a sec and learn what you can do. Speaking of Energy Explosion in the 6-drop, we are now playing 3 in the deck. It's a 35k, has this auto... when you play this card, you can choose you choose 3 energy in your energy area, place them in your drop area, and then choose 3 battle cards, or choose 3 cards in your drop area and place them back in your energy area, ignoring energy exhaust, which is ridiculous. So if you paid the 3 for Rival Seeker and then upgraded into this will reset the 3 energy from Rival Seeker, which is absurd. This card, of course, has the Invoker keyword skill, which allows you to play your Catastrophic Blows for 1 energy. Or if you need to, if you can't kill him that turn, you can just develop this card. Then it lets you play all of your other spells for 1 energy, of course. And being a 35k, it's pretty tricky to remove unless your opponent has flat-out removal built into their deck. And then, of course, just stapled onto this card, they decide to put auto once per turn. When your opponent takes when one of your cards, sorry, deals damage to your opponent this turn, deal 1 extra damage to your opponent. So it turns your first catastrophic blow into 2 damage. It turns your first combat damage that you're able to deal into 2 damage, which is already absurd because it's a 35k and your opponent has to combo away like 4 cards to not take this damage. And then of course we're coming to the SCR of the deck. We have Son Goku and Vegeta, Apex of Power. This card is probably the only SCR I would ever consider playing for this deck. It was handcrafted for this leader. It almost seems like Bandai built this deck for us, and didn't expect this deck to perform as well as it does. It has, of course, the notable tags on this card are Victor Strike. When this card deals damage to your opponent, you win the game. That already is amazing. But more often, and it also has Invoker for those who don't know, in case you can't kill them with the Victor Strike, the negate, and you go into your opponent's turn, they're trying to push through. It also has the Invoker keyword skill if it wasn't good enough, and it has this activate main for 2 blue or 3 blue and 2 red. If you have at least 5 multicolor red-blue extra cards in your drop, so that's something you can check for when your opponent goes to play their Apex of Power. You can, in window 1, you would reveal this card and say you activate the card. It would blank all of your opponent's cards except for their extra cards. So this includes their battle cards, of course. This includes their unison cards, and this includes their leader cards in all areas. They all become blank, no effects. And then in window 2, this card comes down, and it can go for the Victory Strike. This is usually a backup win con to the Energy Explosion. Since this deck maybe in total has about 140k in combo power, rough take. It's really rare to kill somebody with Apex Power unless you've already peeked at your opponent's hand and you know they cannot outcombo this card. However, its strongest point is that ability to blank all of your opponent's cards until the end of their next turn, giving you an entire next turn to once again try to hit them with Victory Strike and or burn them out to death. So that's the main deck of the deck. It is only 50 cards. One of my close friends, he does play 52, and he sees quite a bit of success with the deck as well. But I think for a deck to be as consistent as you can, you definitely want to try to keep this deck at 50, which is one of the challenges of deck building with this deck. Going into the side deck for this event, there are some things I tried that are new, and I'll get to that at the end. So let's start with the standard pieces. We have 2 Son Goku striving to be the best. This card is best used on the play versus Sin Shenron, or on the play versus VJX, really versus any deck that goes low to the ground that you can use on the play. VJX has a harder time clearing this than Sin Shenron does, and especially because Sin Shenron, if you're on the draw, Sin Shenron will already have gotten rid of their 2-drop, and they would have taken a life from it, so it doesn't really buy you anything. But if you're on the play, and you play top on 1 and striving on 2, now you're a lot safer on 2 because that little 15 or that little 10k dolphin cannot crit you through this. And if they choose to use the final flash to clear this effect, then they only have 1 more energy for the dolphin. Their turn's a lot slower. Versus VJX, of course, this prevents them from self-awakening during their turn. Through there's like Son Goku and the Vegetas. I think it's like True Fighting Spirits. They can't use the Black Mass Saiyan to self-awaken. That's a really great tool versus them. Moving forward, we have 2 Beerus Balls. The 2 Beerus Balls are still in here for green decks to beat out like Charismatic Villain where you're going for your kill combo. Oftentimes that's all green decks have to use against you. Now they have that new cooler card, so you kind of have to use your leader to rip that card out of their hand, and then have Beerus Ball up to deal Charismatic Villain, and green decks still suffer to this deck's win con. It does have an additional effect where you can like gain 5k if you try to use this on your opponent's turn, which is kind of cool if you're playing against red decks and you're trying to deal with like Broly Crowns of Retribution. You can like pay 1 energy to prevent the Broly Crown of Retribution of ripping your win cons out of your hand, and you get an extra 5k to try to survive their turn, which is really cool. Moving forward from that, we have our like anti-hand control package. So we have a second copy of Wearing This Together. Versus the decks where you would use the Raigeki on, like super fast wide decks, you don't have the time to use the first activate main. But versus decks that constantly take cards out of your hand or force you to discard to try to whittle down your hand count, the second effect where you can pay 1 red to put it back in your hand completely just like turns that kind of strategy, makes it ineffective, right? Because every time they make you discard, you just discard this, and then you pay 1 red on your turn to pick it back up, and you just hold it for their next discard. And they can just never actually chop down your hand. You're gaining effective advantage while they're paying energy or sacrificing cards to try to make you discard cards. Then we have 2 copies of Tyranny's Cost. Tyranny's Cost is more for like those control matchups, the mirror matches, matches that are really slow and you don't feel pressure enough, so you can use the time to pay 2 to draw 2, or if you're lucky enough, have Invoker up and pay 1 to draw 2. And of course it has this like stapled on effect where if your opponent has more than 10 cards, they can shuffle down. They have to shuffle cards from their hand back into their deck until they have 10. And the shuffling is more important than the actual like loss of cards to them, because a lot of these card control decks like to have their deck up set up in a certain order or going through their decks very systematically, and you being able to force a shuffle in their deck oftentimes buys you that extra time you need to piece together your combo. Then we, of course, have the two Topo Righteous Aids. Topo's Righteous Aids, because this format is going very wide, Topo Righteous Aid is back on top of a Floodgate, or like an answer, or a way to stop turns. So we're definitely back to using this card. Like I said earlier, we might move these guys back into the main and move some Violent Rays back on the side. And then to round out the standard sideboard choices, we have two more copies of Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Son Goku Concentrated Destruction. This really is a card used to take on Mecha Frieza, since they play that Goku that like floodgates you out of your extra cards. They play a Slug that floodgates you out of drawing, and it's not to be really used in the mirror, and it doesn't pop any other barrier like threats in the game. The other use it has this you can pay 3 to play. It has deflex, so it's going to come down, and has this auto when played. You can KO all of your opponent's 20Ks or less. So in the same way that we're in this together is too slow for the fast decks that go wide, Super Saiyan Blue or Kaioken kind of takes care of that problem for you, right? Because you can just play it on 3 instead of Vegeta and clear the field and force your opponent to rebuild their field or lose out on all pressure. And just as a bonus, this card is also a Universe 7 tag, so your leader can use the backside effect while you have this battle card up front. When you play it, oftentimes you're not going to attack with it. You're just going to leave it in active mode, so you can combo it off if you need to, or so you can ensure that you're going to have control of Universe 7 for this ability to thought seize your opponent. And moving on into the more niche cards I used this weekend or tried out, I had this Beerus and Whis Universe 7 Destroying Angel. So a lot of times red decks, and actually just a lot of decks, are finding ways to remove our Vegeta when they feel safe to go in for the kill. Red decks have that Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Concentrated Destruction like we do. And even black decks have like this demonic removal card that like pay 3 energy or some garbage. Green has some way to remove, like everything in green now removes barrier. So almost every color except yellow has a way to physically remove your Vegeta off the field, removing your Invoker keyword skill when they're ready to kill you. Well, this Beerus and Whis, when you lose your Invoker Vegeta, you can play this card from your hand for free. It comes down, it also has Invoker and has Blocker. It's a 20k, so it's pretty nifty at that. And then at the end of the turn, at the end of that turn that it comes down of your opponent's turn, it bottom decks itself and then replaces itself by drawing you another card. So you can go into your kill turn a lot cleaner. This card rarely came up because I didn't play against red that much this weekend, but in theory it would be very clean. Also, it has some applications in the mirror match too when you're trying to hold up Vegeta to maintain Royal Condemnation. The other nifty card I tried out was Frieza, Full Power Frieza 100% Overdrive. Unlike the blue decks of today, which are playing this card through Rebirth, we are a red-blue multicolored deck, so we can just cast this for 5, adding another win con to our arsenal. A lot of times today, people that are countering this deck are playing stuff like Super Kamehameha to beat the Rival Seeker. They're playing Mecha Cabra, the Broken Seal, and then calling Apex so that we can't even Apex them if they're holding up a Super Kamehameha. And we find ourselves in this like weird bind by the time we get to our kill turn. We're like, oh no, how else do we beat these decks, right? And decks I'm talking about specifically are like King Piccolo or like Dark Broly, right? King Piccolo has like Omen of Awakening for the Rival Seeker. They have multiple testing the oppositions or Violent Rays so that we can't even kill them with Victory Strike. And it becomes a pain to use our traditional win cons. Well, now we've added this third bomb to the deck, Full Power Frieza 100% Overdrive. You just tap out for it. Most of these decks like KP or Dark Broly draw through their decks so fast. They have like 10 or 12 cards by the time you get to your turn 5 because they're really trying to put on the pressure, right? Trying to get your life down before you can even get to your turn 5. So a lot of times you're limping into turn 5, trying to just dig for a way, claw for a way to take that game back. And this card is a way to do it. They often have like 6 or 7 cards left in the battlefield because that's what they tried to kill you with on their last turn. And you manage to evade all their attacks, combo out, whatever be it. And finally, you can just hard slam this Frieza, mill them out for the rest of their life, And it's a win con that they either have to pick between on their broken seal. They either pick this or they pick the victory strike, and it just adds another tool to our arsenal. Plus, a lot of red decks are starting to play this Vegito card that doesn't allow you to play cards through skills, right? So that means you can't use Rival Seeker to play your Energy Explosion. You can't activate the main on your Victory Strike, but you can pay 5 to play full Power Freeze or 100% Overdrive, kill the Vegito in one swift blow, and mill out your opponent at the same time, or set yourself up for victory, right? So this is definitely a card worth trying in this deck if you find yourself being locked out of your win cons. And then the last 2 cards I played for this weekend were 2 copies of Burning Slash. In testing, the only cards I was really losing to were counters. King Vegeta and Mono Red decks have that new counter that snuffs out your Dimension Magic if you're in that spot. But that's less scary than the 2 I'm about to mention. You have the cooler counter from Mecha Frieza and Sin Shenron, which backs up their Cell Xeno attack. And then you also have the Majin Buu Xeno SCR counter, which backs up the Unison triple striker from the new King Cold deck, and both of those cards coming through, whether it's a triple strike from the King Cold deck, Unison, or if it's the Cell Xeno, are just deathly threatening to this deck if they get through. Of course, the Unison you can't even interact with this deck, barring playing some like really niche activate battle cards that are not good in the game otherwise. And then of course Cell Xeno, it takes you 2 Death Beams and more sometimes to get rid of that card. So Burning Slash gives us a way to just hard negate those cards and not even worry about the counters that come in. Oftentimes those cards are coming down to turn 3s or 4. So as long as you have 1 copy of each going into those turns, or 1 copy going to those turns, and find a 2nd copy going to turn 4, it pretty much guarantees you safe passage going into your kill turn, which is turn 5, and you can win the game from there. So if you're getting destroyed by Cooler and just counter effects, this is definitely a card to look into. Um, but yeah, that completes my entire deck profile for this weekend at PPG Miami. I definitely will be making some drastic Set 13 changes to the deck. Set 13 brought some like a gratuitous amount of new toys to Invoker. Every time a new red or blue card comes out in this game, Invoker looks to take advantage of it. So I'm definitely excited to showcase those cards in the next deck profile I get to make with this deck. But until then, thanks for watching.